Welcome everyone to the first installment of the PTZOptics and HuddleCamHD Tech Town Hall, hosted by myself, William Golde. I'm the Global Director of Channel Sales here. Now this week we are speaking with Stephen Heywood. He's our in-house broadcast engineer. We call him actually a product evangelist. Now he really is all things live streaming video conferencing. He's been in the industry for decades at this point. He started at an extremely young age, and he's kept at it through every iteration of live streaming and video production, really on a small scale. So this month in January, we're talking about what is a studio. Now, this being the first installment of this series, we wanted to start with a very broad and basic topic and really dive in and see how the studio has changed over the years and what technologies are going into newer studios and what technologies you as consumers and maybe engineers or salespeople should be on the lookout for. Now, the format here, we got our sales teams together along with our product managers and Stephen to really just ask some questions. What is a studio? Really see what a studio has become so that we can better help you in the real world when you're designing your studio system. Now, this is kind of an open forum. Obviously, we have question and answers at the end. Now, in the YouTube link here, if you just want to leave comments and questions in the YouTube video, you definitely can. We will definitely answer anything that you come up with. So without further ado, here is our first installment of the Tech Town Hall with Stephen Heywood, talking about what is a studio.
This is kind of my wheelhouse. I've been doing live for over 15 years, and I've seen this technology, as Will stated, change drastically in the last 2 years just through the pandemic, but more so just changing and organically changing over the last couple of years. I've had a studio, many iterations, a lot of trial and errors and things. And for those that don't know, I run my own broadcasting site, the Tech Buzz, and that's how a lot of the audience knows who I am. And I've been doing it for, like I said, over 15 years. I've been offered to speak in different places. I spoke at a place called PodCamp Pittsburgh on how to build your brand in social media almost 10 years ago. I've done things like that. I was telling Matt, I've also had the privilege of interviewing. This is my studio. I want to say it was about 13 years ago. I had the privilege of interviewing the man, co-founder of Apple, Steve Wozniak, which was a great opportunity. It's one of the highlights of my broadcasting career, if you want to say that. And I'm just going to briefly go through this so you can kind of see the evolution of where I'm at right now and what I'm doing. The very first time I ever got on camera, we were getting ready to move, and you can see I didn't take much pride in what was behind me, lighting and things like that. I'm just going to kind of skim through. You can see kind of the video just kind of changing with chat on screen, the studio changing over time. It really evolved after I got the wirecast. I started figuring out how I can make it look a little bit more professional, getting into HD, then to where we're at right now. I did a lot of also mobile streams and things like that from CES, and had the opportunity to interview some different people. At the time, I didn't even know who some of these guys were. Like, I wasn't really into rap, but I had the opportunity because I was live interviewing T-Pain. I guess he's a pretty big rapper back in 2011. And then also somebody that I've looked up to for many, many, many years, Leo Laporte, who, as Matt and I have discussed, the godfather, if you will, of live broadcast, radio, and technology. So a little bit of background on me from where I'm at, where I started, and to this studio. So I think one of the big things to keep in mind is everybody's studio is different. You might just call a little closet that you're not using a studio. You might put a few computers in it, a laptop and a desktop, a microphone and a camera. Everybody's iteration of a studio is different. Mine is very elaborate, and mine is set up to basically be something that I can host a show and also produce it. I'm a one-man producer, and I've learned by using some different equipment that I'm going to show you here in a little bit, how to do it and practice to where I can look at the camera and be able to switch things without making it look like I'm switching cameras and doing things. As you can see, I have a plethora of computers and monitors and things around me, and they all serve a purpose. And it helps to not keep all the eggs in one basket. And when I work with people on building a studio, they always ask, why do you need so many computers? And if you have a failure, it's easier to come and get back if you have one item running on a particular computer than it is if you run everything off of one computer. If it goes down, now you're in trouble, right? So my philosophy is, and it's just the way I've always done it, and I have a 99.9% uptime, is to try and basically put different things on different computers. And I'm gonna kind of walk through that here in a second. I guess what we could do here is we can kind of get into a little show and tell here. And then if you guys have any questions on it, feel free to just kind of interrupt me or jump in. So I'm gonna switch to my mobile. Let's start over here with kind of my rack. So I have a big rack set up here. I've got a wirecast gear box, which is the highest model that they have. For the longest time, I ran this with SDI out. Now my whole studio is set up for NDI. So a lot of this gear that you're going to see is set up for either NDI or SDI. The old Tally Lights NDI controller, which is rack mountable, before we had purchased the company, Ted, the previous owner, he had sent that out to me to test and review. And I have different Tally Lights throughout the studio that you're going to see. I have an AJ Akumo patch bay. Basically, this is an SDI router, and it allows me, if I want to use this as a controller, to route different inputs over SDI to different areas of my studio. This is our, this is my live to air machine, which is basically this software running right here. Allows me to bring in high quality professional guests into my show. This is the actual router on the back of here. You would see a bunch of SDI inputs and outputs. This is just a power strip, a fan bay, and then the heart of the studio is the Tricaster TC1 from NewTek, which enables me to basically route video and switch and give the professional look that you would see on CNN, Fox, and those types of things. The wirecast gear is output to this TV monitor right here. Right now, I have the ability to switch between pre-recorded and recorded, or pre-recorded and live through vMix. I have some special software. I'll get into that in a little bit, which allows me to, using a Stream Deck, control this computer, because the question always comes up, well, why do you have this all the way over here when you're sitting back over there? And like I said, I have the ability to control it over there, and we'll kind of get to that. A lot of people think I use a green screen when I don't. I have a 4K TV that sits behind me, and I actually took a picture of this setup here, and I put it as my background because I didn't like the angle of the other camera. So I have also the ability to change this background, and I'll show you guys on just by pressing a button in front of me. I can change the background to anything that I want, depending on the show that I'm doing. And if I have to be a guest for the company, I can keep something really professional, just keep a nice background like that. And let me see if I can get this on the gimbal just to kind of set it up so you can kind of get an idea. That's what the background would look like. So there's a lot of thought that went into this and how I could run this solely. I also have these controllers. Well, they're great for decoration, but they're also functional. If I'm doing a demonstration where I'm standing in front of this TV, like almost like a weather person, I can still control my Tricaster or vMix using these controllers back here without actually having to go back to my desk, which sits right here. So when we bought this house, there was a giant bar here. That's what the previous owners had used it for. And what I saw was a streaming studio with that. And this is why. I have a lot of my gear. You're going to see they're suspended off the desk, and the reason for that is vibration and noise. I'm very adamant on making sure that things are quiet, especially using like a podcast style, radio style microphone. With doing radio in my previous life, noise is key. So if we can eliminate that, it's all well and good. This is my Tricaster's keyboard. So anytime I need to edit any text on the Tricaster's interface here, and for those that maybe don't know what a Tricaster is, it's basically a hardware video switcher. Maybe you've heard of Wirecast, OBS, vMix. NewTek controls the environment kind of the way Apple does versus Android. Apple locks things down, doesn't allow you to do some things that you might do on your Android. NewTek kind of does something similar. So it really gives you the reliability that you need in a video switcher in hardware form. This is my call screener computer. This is all that this machine does. So when somebody calls in the live to air, I can pop them up and then send them to the studio, but I can actually make sure that their head and shoulders look good, their audio sounds good before sending them to the studio, and make sure that's all dialed in without anybody on the live stream hearing it. That's one of the cool things that I like about the live to air system. This is it's not a digital mixer, but it's my iPad Pro running my PreSonus software to where it's remotely connecting. So I can mute and unmute mics if I have to cough, or if there's a noise coming from somebody, I can just quick mute them. And I color code each channel so I can easily look at it from sitting here and it's within arm's reach. That's something else you're going to see here. A lot of my gear is within arm's reach, and that's because being, a host / producer, I need to be able to do that. Here you can see I have the Super Joy set up. It is connected to this mini monitor, and it allows me then to pull up different camera shots within it, make adjustments on the fly without affecting anything that I'm doing inside of the Tricaster's interface right here. I have a Stream Deck here that's running. This also allows me to control both the Tricaster and vMix because of a piece of software that I use called Central Control. Central Control will bridge different programs. You run it on a PC, and like I was showing you guys before, I can switch backgrounds. I have them listed here. I can mute audio, different things that I can't do with the Tricaster and other software. I can do it again within arm's reach of myself. So I usually set that there with the Tricaster's control surface. I basically play it like a piano, like an instrument. I've practiced to where I put my fingers on it and I can feel to where I know where certain buttons are, and I can switch by looking at the camera. Like I said, I have a radio style mic. I really like the Heil PR40. It's really great dynamic microphone, which is a directional microphone. A lot of guys, you'll see they use the Blue Yeti. That's a condenser microphone, picks up a lot of background noise. The microphone I'm using right now, the over the ear, is a condenser, so it picks up, you'll hear it with fans and stuff on the rack. This prevents it because of how close I am to this rack and the fans. I need to make sure that you don't hear that kind of stuff. This computer I use for my vMix comments. So a lot of times in a show, I bring up a lower third, a graphic on the bottom of my video, and show a comment. These are leftover comments from the show I did Friday, which allows me to interact. And a lot of times you can see Will's on that TV right now from in Zoom. That's how I would monitor a Zoom call, looking out at my PTZOptics cameras right here, depending on which one I'm on. And I also have preview program here with a clock, because Will said half an hour, done. So I have a clock there so I can make sure to be done on time. But I also, during a show when I'm not doing Zoom, I have this chat up there so I can easily read the chat, where it's a combination of YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. Well, again, while I'm producing, so I can see that. This wall, I've kind of put together a nice banner here. I've got the PTZOptics logo with some. It doesn't do it justice. You see some hot spots here on this camera, but believe me, it fills it really nice. It's just some different partners and companies that I work with as well, when I can put a product in front of it, get a nice product shot of it, and have a nice clean background behind it. So a lot of times that's what I use that for. When I have an in-studio guest, I have them sit here. They have the same type of microphone, a computer that they can pull up anything with. But then what I've done is I put backdrops up here on a shower curtain rod that I can easily pull down in front of my rack to give them the appearance that they're in a totally different location. So I've tried to think of just about everything that I could within means. And then of course I've got an over the shoulder shot here of the PTZOptics camera. I really like this ability if I'm doing a demonstration for the broadcast show, I can hold something in front of me like this and I'm not contorting myself. I can use that camera to kind of catch an over the shoulder shot. I use the EPTZ camera up here for a drop down shot, if you will, of kind of what I'm doing here. I'll switch to that shot so you can see. This is the shot that people are always intrigued by the gear that I use. So this is a great way that they get to see within the studio what I'm doing here, or how I'm switching and things like that. Now I'm going to try not to blind you guys, but I've got tunable lights back there that are LED. Okay. And so I have the temperature set to where I'm not looking blown out. And then I also have what's called hair lights above here. And these were track lights that were in here. And basically that just separates me from the background. I have them dialed in so they're not overly dramatic, but they give you that effect where you're sticking off of your background. And then I also have a key fill light that I use on the side here, which is set to the same temperature as these lights. And that's very important. You don't want to mix different types of lighting, because if you mix different types of lighting, bad things happen as far as skin tone and things like that. And you'll see I have a bunch of different knickknacks and things like that that I have up here. Mainly, showing different cameras, PTZOptics stuff when I'm doing webinars or things like that. I want them in the frame just as a subtle showing of product. Now, this is like my main studio. So on the front of the bar, I also have, if somebody's in-house, that they can watch what's going out to the internet. And I have that right on the front of the bar, mounted, clean, so people can see. One of the other things that I do is I do a live gaming stream. So I have a separate setup studio right here. And I try to keep this on the cheap, if you will, because most of the gamers, that's what they're doing. So I can kind of show them, exactly what I'm doing. So I do use OBS over here, which is open broadcast software, with a bunch of other free utilities. My audio mixer is right here in front of me usually. So here I don't really need to use the iPad. I've got it right here in front of me. I have a stream deck that allows me to switch the sources inside of my game streaming here. And then I have like a Discord chat that stays up on that monitor. But this is actually my work area as well. So a lot of times in Zoom, if you're on Zoom with me and you see me looking up, it's mainly because I have the Zoom meeting up here. So that way, if I'm answering emails or doing other things here, chatting, with coworkers, questions, I can still do that without affecting anything with the Zoom. And then I just picked up some, I don't know, I think they were $30 LED lights that are also tunable, dimmable. And again, the same type of microphone. But because I do a game streaming, I do have a studio full of these retro arcades that I do a lot of reviews with. Game consoles, it's things that they do. But the cool thing is about it, when I'm doing the shows, I have PTZOptics cameras with tally lights throughout the studio, and being wireless, being able to hear and control the Tricaster different ways. I have PTZOptics cameras set up. Like here's the Simple Track Mini or Simple Track Lite. I'm able to have that over here to track me. I have another one right up here. So it gives me different angles for doing these shows. Or if I'm sitting over here playing this arcade, which is internet connected, I have one of the HuddleCamHDs up here. And as you can see, they all have tally lights on. So if I have my son or somebody, switching, believe it or not, they can do it. I know what camera they're on. So yeah, that's kind of a gist of my studio.
I think for our concept, or what we're talking about today, that is without a doubt like the top of the line, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
like I think a lot of the studios that we'll be dealing with in our day to day aren't going to be that complex. But it's always awesome to see how far you can go with it. So I think that's a great like just concept or ability to visualize like what a studio could be. The fact that you technically have two studios kind of built into one is kind of wild. Again, this is why you're the guy and we're going there. But so I mean, obviously you have like what would be considered top of the line, very, very complex setup, multiple cameras, multiple use cases. But just dialing it back to what the studio is, because you could you conceptualize for us, like if you had to pick, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 pieces of gear that you would need to make a studio, what for you are those pieces that you just have to have that makes it not just, oh, this is a place where I can shoot a quick video, to this is what a studio is?
So I'll start by saying a studio is whatever you make the studio. You can call an art studio if it's just a place that you're going to paint. So I don't really, if somebody shows me a computer, a webcam, and a microphone and says, this is my studio, I don't challenge that, because that's their studio. That's where they do their work. So first and foremost, piece of gear I couldn't live without is a good microphone. You got to have a good microphone. And if it's not a studio, and I apologize, when I run around, you probably saw foam on the walls. That's acoustic foam to help deaden the sound. If you notice, I have a pretty large room. So when I first sat down, it would just echo. It would be like an echo chamber in here. So having that, having a good microphone, most people aren't going to put acoustic foam in their house. They're just not going to do it. So having a good microphone is key. The next thing, obviously, if you can't see the person, well, then you really just have radio, right? So good camera, good microphone. Those should be top. I tell people that all the time. Forget the whiz bang graphics flying across the screen. If people can't hear you and people can't see you and they can't get in touch and really connect with you on a live stream, they're going to tune out. Doesn't matter how much graphics that you have flying across the screen. They might see, well, that's kind of cool, and then they'll tune out. So those two things are key. The next big thing, in my opinion, in a studio, you got to have a big internet pipe. You got to have enough internet that you can live stream and do what you need to do. That kind of goes in hand, not necessarily in that order, with a good computer, right? You got to have a beefy machine. It doesn't have to be over the top expensive, but something that's relatively new, not something that's from 3 to 5 years ago. You could probably get by with something like that, but you're not going to get today's quality on something that old. It's just, it'll be hard to do multiple camera shots and things like that if you want to do that. People make this mistake a lot, is streaming platforms. So if you're going to live stream with your studio, or if you're going to record, know your audience that you're trying to approach, right? So I stream on YouTube and Twitch when I do my game streaming, but when I do my normal talk shows, I don't really stream on Twitch, because that audience is more for gaming and things of that nature. You don't want to take somebody that's doing tech and stream on sermon.net. That's just so you got to know your audience. You got to know where you're going to send your content to get the best results. So for me, I know you probably asked for like 8 pieces of equipment, but for me, those are like the top 5. Then you can kind of move into getting like headphones, and you don't need super expensive ones. I tend to say to people, there's some good $50 headphones. In fact, Matt might even still have the link. I don't have it handy, but I got some for my son. I wear these in-ear buds from Shure. I think they're the 536s. They're like almost $600 earbuds. But I also use them as a musician, as a drummer. I need isolation and I need good sound. So I also use them here for broadcasting, so you don't see them. But for somebody starting out, as you said, Will, they don't need $600 earbuds. In fact, I found ones that are similar to this for like, Matt, I want to say they were what, $30? Is that what they were?
I'm looking for the link, but they were $50 or less.
Yeah, but they're really nice because you don't see them in your ears. They don't look like the Apple AirPods where they're falling out of your ear, or like the Samsung big knobs. And you don't have to wear the big cans like you're some big radio, superstar. So they have really good sound. I was really impressed with them. I use them when I take out my studio on. I have another. Okay, so I have a third studio, which you haven't seen. It's in a box.
Of course you do. We're not surprised.
when I did school, when I was doing stuff for the school, I have a rack-mounted vMix setup that's all self-contained with a live view that I can just plug in and go. Okay, I use them on the road when I do that kind of stuff for volunteering for the school or churches and things like that need help. So for in-ear, that's that's going to be up to the individual, but we have a link for it. I'll have to see if I can find it. I don't know if you want to, you tie it to this somehow, but
Yeah.
great $30 pair of earbuds. I think they're great. So getting started, I think that's what you should focus on.
Kevin actually had a great question. So you talked about internet and the need for good internet. Is there like an up-down speed that you use as a general rule of thumb to say, like, this is where you want to be if you want to start to live stream and use an at-home or mobile studio?
That's a great question. So just so you know, my studio right now, I have about 400 megs down and about 30 megs up. Now, granted, I am using call-ins. At least 4 people are calling in. Sometimes I have Zoom going with those call-ins. So the question that I would ask a customer, if you are asked that question, is, do you plan on having remote guests? Are you planning on hosting a Zoom or a GoToMeeting or whatever? But I would say a bare minimum, and I've done this even before, I would say at least 10 megs up. In this day and age, you should be able to get 10 megs up where you're at, unless you're in a place where you just get dial up or sometimes dry loop DSL. But the upload is more important. The other factor that you run into is streaming 1080p. If you're streaming 1080p, you need anywhere from 4 to 8 megs on the upload. So if you're planning on doing guests with that, you could get away with going 4 megs, but you should factor in, if you have 10 megs on your upload, half of that is what you should be your top. So essentially 5. You need to work within that confines. Otherwise, you're going to get buffering, because bitrate, people don't realize, is when you're streaming, you might have it set to 4, but it's going to fluctuate depending on the picture, the quality, the movement on screen. That's going to fluctuate. So if you cap yourself at half of your maximum upload, you'll be sitting pretty and have the least amount of buffering and delays and things like that.
And then also, you talked about a computer.
Yes, sir.
Again, rule of thumb specs on a computer. Someone's like, okay, I need a computer. What's like, a memory? What? Talk to us about the computer specs that you would recommend.
One of the things that, even when I got here, when we were talking about a computer and I was talking with Matt, like, I think the MacBook Pro I have is an i9. It's an i9. It's I think it's a dual quad. If I have to, I'd have to look it up here. But it has like 16 gigs of RAM at this point in time. And Matt might be able to speak a little bit more to this. Actually, it has 32 gigs of RAM. You want to have a beefy machine when you're trying to do this, because you're integrating NDI, you're integrating, capture cards and things like that. You need to have the resources available. And the graphics, I want to say the graphics here is 8 gigs. It looks like 8 gig card, and it's an AMD Radeon. But I know a lot of guys, again, that's going to be subjective. Some guys hate AMD, but they like NVIDIA. So it's subjective. I use them both.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, you need a machine at 16 gigs with a fairly decent graphics card. And,
yeah.
And again, depending on, like you're saying, how many sources you're bringing in, how many things you're trying to manage and handle.
And a lot of times people will skimp on the hard drive, and your computer's only as fast. Your computer's only as fast as its slowest component, right? So if you have a regular spinning drive, a SATA drive, right? And you have all this beefed up processor, and it's still going to be slow because you're not getting that read-write speed from the hard drive. So again, I recommend, if you're going to do even a laptop, most of them allow you to do 2 drives nowadays because there's no CD drive.
Yeah.
At least a 256 SSD with a, like say a terabyte, external. Matt, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I might even, if you're doing a Windows operating system, I might push people towards a 512 at this point, just because the Windows operating system itself is close to 100 gigs anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So that's what you want to make sure that people aren't going to skimp on, because you could have all this hardware and you take the shortcut and don't buy a good, SSD drive or even solid state memory drive, and it's going to be crawling.
Won't matter no matter what you do.
Exactly.
It's a sum of the whole kind of thing. Sticking with the computer, Sean O'Connor was curious, what's the Command Central software And is that something viable for somebody running a home studio?
Is he talking about central control?
Command Central software was his question.
Yes, that is what I was referencing. I could
Okay.
not remember the name of it.
No, you're good. So actually, believe it or not, a buddy of mine that grew up watching my show, he was 13 years old, developed this. He's 25 years old now. And if you go to centralcontrol.io, and I brought it up on the screen here, it's $50 one-time fee. You know, I supported him. I bought like 3 copies of it because I needed it for my mobile rig, and I needed it for another experimental thing that I was doing. But this is the software and we've kind of partnered with him because he built in PTZ control within this software. So you can control your PTZ cameras, but it works with vMix, PowerPoint, Tricaster, Wirecast. I mean, you can get in there and download a 30-day trial and play with it. Really good guy. He's based over in the UK. And as you can see, I use it so I can control all the stuff with one controller right in front of me. I don't have to go scrambling for a mouse or a keyboard or anything like that. So $50.
Yeah, I guess at $50, if you're at home, $50 is $50. So
$50 with OBS even. I mean,
yeah, could be helpful. It seems like it's a fairly functional piece of equipment. So, you know, it's at $50, might as well give it a shot after you get into a little bit of studio work. Looks like Matt had a question here as well. Said, I saw you're running vMix and the Tricaster software simultaneously in your main studio setup. Which platform is running your production, question mark? Are you pulling your vMix feed into the Tricaster? If so, what is the production value do you get from running vMix that you couldn't get directly from the Tricaster software? So for you at the highest of levels, why the mix and match? Do you prefer one or the other? Speak to that a little bit.
One of the things that the Tricaster does is quality compared to even vMix. I know vMix has great quality, but I wanted that television level quality that you can get. And one of the other things is this, having the controller in front of me. This is usually my hand position when I'm doing a show. I can slide my hand down and I know where I'm at. I can move it up here and I know where I'm at. I know there's other keyboards and things out there that you can do that, but what I'm doing is taking the output of the Tricaster, putting it into vMix. So all vMix is essentially doing for me, powering the TV behind me, putting whatever graphic up that I want. It's streaming and it's recording. Again, offloading the balance, right? So if the Tricaster would crash, I could still have the stream going and I'm not losing my audience. And I have a backup to where I can flip a switch and have the vMix interface on this monitor in front of me and finish the show because everything's NDI. Bring those cameras into vMix, even if I had to, because you're making the show on a fly in vMix because it's not set up that way. I could at least bring my camera in until, I get it fixed after the show or something. And I've had that happen in the past on an older Tricaster. So
got it.
That's the benefits, not putting all your eggs in one basket. And if I'm doing client work or I'm doing something for us here at PTZOptics, I record on the Tricaster and I record in vMix. So you have that backup of a recording. So if something happens, you at least have a backup.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Redundancy is also, or is always a good idea, right? Never bad to have built-in redundancy, especially in a live broadcast, right? Because if one piece, the essential puzzle goes down, you're dead in the water. Right. So you might as well, build that.
Even go into like batteries for if you're using a wireless microphone or headset, having backup batteries. I kind of get overkill with some of that, but I've had failures in the past. Had I just bought an extra rechargeable battery or something, that I wouldn't have had that dilemma.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, I want to touch on NDI. You say that everything in your studio is NDI. I had the aha moment or the come to Jesus moment with NDI. I went out to visit the USC campus. There's a gentleman out there. He was running the studio basically for the entire School of Education at USC, and he had built out this extremely impressive NDI infrastructure. Mind you, this was a few years back, so he had access to some of the most powerful infrastructure he could get his hands on. But I saw him, he was controlling from one room. He would just invite teachers in to sit in front of a green screen. They would do all their continuing education, all of their advertising. Like this room was used for so much, and it was all NDI. And it's really before NDI was, you know, somewhat universally adopted. What for you made you change from SDI to NDI? Because you mentioned that you did have SDI in the past, but then you've now switched to almost fully NDI. Talk to us a little bit about what that impetus was. Why did you make that change?
Just because the quality is there, but also you can't tell if I'm using SDI or NDI right now. Whereas if I use SDI, that router that I showed you in the rack, now it's obsolete because I don't need it anymore because I have NDI. So that's about $4,000 worth of equipment that I don't need anymore. And with the ability of power over Ethernet, I just run Ethernet cables to all the PTZOptics cameras that I'm running, run them into a PoE switch. I don't need power adapters. I don't need to scramble to find outlets to plug these into. I don't need extension cords that are 3 miles long to try to get to a power outlet that's on the side of the wall. So that makes the studio look a lot cleaner. Fortunately, I have some drop ceilings, so I can run Ethernet cable up through the drop ceilings to keep it clean. I will state that my cameras are still connected to SDI because I got the cameras before NDI really was polished, if you will. So I just keep it on as a backup, just like I'm not ripping the gear out of the rack. If something would happen to the network, I could still switch over to SDI and be back up and running. But the pros outweigh the cons because, like you said, my setup is overkill. But let's talk about the guy that has OBS, the free solution that has NDI built in. That guy is going to have to go out and spend $300 on a good capture card. Now, I know Matt and I have been playing with these $20 and $30 capture cards, which sometimes overheat. I've had a few of them die on me. So you get a $300 Magewell for every PTZOptics camera that you have that has SDI or HDMI. That adds up. Or you spend the money on a $300, $400 NDI license, and you can put that camera anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be within so many feet of your computer to reach that capture card. And you're not running into USB bus overloads because you're using a laptop and you only have 3 USB ports. So you're limited to 1 or 2 cameras. Now you're only limited by your network.
Got it.
So
yeah,
those are some things that,
yeah, I think I mean, it's so cool that I think saying NDI wasn't polished previously and now is kind of the best way to think about it because it is now functional in so many different applications. Sticking to technologies, and this will be my last kind of general question, then we can kind of open it up and have a discussion. For you, because you've been doing this honestly probably the longest of all of us combined. It looks like you've been in it from day one, back in the days of SD. What for you over the course of your we'll call it tenure, polished tenure in streaming, what is like the piece of tech or the mind shift that changed the most for you that has had the biggest impact on live streaming, video production, broadcast, anything of the like? Is there anything you can just think of and you're like, yeah, that's what really changed things for the better? We'll take it.
I hate to repeat, but NDI, man, NDI has changed the game. If I had NDI 10 years ago, oh dear Lord, man. I mean, the wires I used to cobble together. If I showed you videos of how I ran component into composite and converted it and changed it and ran it through an EasyCap card, which was then on a USB hub just so I could get that video in at 360p. It's insane. Where I just hook it up to the network and boom, it just populates inside my Tricaster or vMix or wirecast or whatever. That's it. Done.
So Stephen, to piggyback on that, and I think to kind of bring this to, I would say to really highlight this, could you detail for everyone here, if you were to take your current SDI setup and all of a sudden now you needed to accommodate 4K, what would be in that?
You had to go there, didn't you?
Versus NDI.
So, and I don't know if they're still doing it this way with the SDI, because I've totally just lost the interest when they went to the NDI. But in the early days, AJA came out with this first ever 4K capture card that had 4 SDI inputs. In order to get 4K, you had to plug in 4 SDI cables. So now imagine I have 12 cameras in here. If I upgrade, we came out with PTZOptics, let's say, looking down the crystal ball, let's say we come out with a 4K camera, and now I need to look at this and say I have 12 cameras and I need 4 cables on each of those. And the Tricaster only has 4 SDI inputs. So now I have to buy another piece of hardware that's going to take all that in and send it, which is how that switch works that I have. Think of it as, the router, just like your network router goes, that sends signals. I would need that, like Matt said, for every TV that I have here, every monitor, every computer, just so I could send signals all around. Where NDI, I just run an application and boom, it's there.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how streamlined the workflow has become as a result of that. So that's
I would
pull
the,
I like it.
I would pull the SDI out of the rack, but when I moved in here and all the wires that run through the ceiling, I'm like, yeah, we'll just leave that for backup, because I would have 50 million wires that I have to pull out.
Yeah.
Why would you pull them out? They're already there.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. They're not hurting anything. They work as a backup. And honestly, if you're worried about, and I've heard people say this, well, what if the network goes down? Well, guess what? If the network goes down, you're not streaming anyways, because the network just went down.
Well, that answers that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're right about at that mark. I just wanted to open it up to everyone. Again, we have the sales teams here from PTZOptics and HuddleCam, as well as the sales teams from CRS. If anybody has any questions, comments, thoughts that they want to share while we're in this open forum, now is the time. Speak now or forever hold your live streaming peace. Yeah, I guess thanks everyone for joining and participating and having good questions. Before I let you go, Stephen, I got to know, what's your favorite Star Wars movie?
Should I just go with 4, 5, and 6 to make everybody happy?
Oh, come on.
There's really no other answer.
Well, because my kids got to see the remakes, and they enjoyed them. But again, it's from their era. They didn't like sitting through like A New Hope and Return of the Jedi. But Vader's my favorite. If you can't see down below here, but I have tons of Vader gear. I have a semi-authentic costume with voice changer that I do for kids. I dress up as Vader and go to different hospitals and stuff.
I see a new show coming.
Do that.
Tech Hour with Vader.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So something I rigged up, but yeah,
so
I'll have to go with that.
All right, that's totally fair. Cool. With that, we'll wrap it up. Again, thanks everyone.
So thank you everyone for checking out our first installment of the Tech Town Hall at PTZOptics and HuddleCamHD with myself, William Golde, and Stephen Heywood, talking about what is a studio. Now, again, if you have any questions or if there was something that didn't get answered in that discussion, go ahead, leave a comment below. We will be able to answer that for you. And also, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Hit that little bell to get the notifications. We are doing one of these a month, covering all different topics in broadcast, in live streaming, in unified communications, video conferencing, pretty much everything surrounding our products and partnering products that we work with. So definitely, you want to be in touch with us and you want to be notified when a new Tech Town Hall is coming out. And thank you very much. That was the January edition. We look forward to seeing you next month when we're talking about something else interesting. Take care.